Namo Buddhaya. So today we're going to be learning a very beautiful sutta, a sutta that you don't always get to hear. This Dhamma exposition is something that you don't always get to hear, but it's something so important to our life. If a person really catches this point and applies it into his life, he can really quickly develop one's Dhamma path. Because this Dhamma exposition really helps a person to develop a person's mind. Okay, this sutta is found in the Anguttara Nikaya, the book of the eights. And the name of this sutta is called Uttara Sutta. Uttara Sutta. It's found in the Anguttara Nikaya, the book of the eights. Okay, so let's go directly to the sutta as it's a bit long. So on one occasion, Venerable Uttara, he was dwelling at Mahisavattu on Vajalika on Mount Sakya, and there the Venerable Uttara was teaching monks a certain Dhamma exposition. Okay, so who was teaching this? Venerable Uttara was teaching this Dhamma exposition to the monks there. And Venerable Uttara teaches, Auso meaning, auso is the word that you use to address someone who's equal to you. So in the translation, it's translated as friends, but really auso is a word used in the Buddha's dispensation. It does not mean the literal meaning that people use for friends in the everyday language. Okay, so he addressed the bhikkhus as auso and taught these bhikkhus this Dhamma exposition, and there he says, Venerable Uttara says, bhikkhus, it's good from time to time to review your own failings. And it's good for a bhikkhu from time to time to review the failings of others. So what is Venerable Uttara saying? From time to time, a bhikkhu should not know. Here it's referred to as bhikkhu, but of course you can relate this to your life as well. Okay, so Venerable Uttara says, from time to time, a bhikkhu should review his own feelings. That means reflect on his own feelings. It's called vipatti. From time to time, vipattis or failings that you have had in your life. It's something that you should reflect on and investigate and think about. And not just your failings, but also the failings of others, losses of others, tragedies that others face. So here losses meaning losses, tragedies, difficult times a person had to go through. That's what vipatti means. So difficult times, tragedies, losses, right? Because remember the teachers, there are three sampatti. Sampatti means gains and vipatti means losses. Okay. Now, a material vipatti or material loss is loss of wealth. That is a vipatti. Okay, so from time to time, people experience loss of wealth, loss of property, loss of property. And then from the teachers, there's also something called as nyati vipatti. Nyati vipatti means from time to time people lose their relatives, their loved ones, their family members, their relationships. So those are material losses in life. So here, Venerable Uttara is saying from time to time, this is something that you should reflect on, not just your vipattis, not just your losses, but also the losses of others. Now, is this something that people do in life? Do people think about their failings, or do they try to forget about them? Most people don't like to think back about the times they fail or times of tragedy. They try to, completely forget about it, not think about it. But but here, Venerable Uttara is saying, so let's go on to the sutta and um, find out the rest. So here, Venerable Uttara is saying, from time to time, bhikkhu should review or reflect on his own failings as well as the failings of others. And not only that, from time to time, a bhikkhu should review his own achievements. So his gains in life, things he has achieved in life. From time to time, you should think. Okay, so material gains is material wealth. So gains in terms of getting money, getting a good job, and then having relatives around. So there are in certain times you have a lot of gains, and at the same time, others also think of others, reflect on others' gains as well. Others, sampatti. Sampatti means the good times or gains in life. Okay, so that is the exposition that was taught to bhikkhus. So what is it? From time to time, a bhikkhu should think of his own failings and others' failings, and from time to time, a bhikkhu should think of his own gains or achievements and the achievements of others. Okay, so now you can do this. Now this is a new year has started. Now you can look back into your last year and see, what were my failings? What were my gains? And at the same time, in the past year, what were others' achievements? What were others' gains? And what were others' failings? Right? This is something a person should think about. Okay, now if you look back into your past year or two, you can remember times maybe you got a good job, and then there was at certain point you lost it. So that's a loss. Okay, there were certain times in your life where you had a lot of wealth, and then there are certain times where you lost it. So now when you can investigate and think, how did I gain it? How did I lose it? Was it something I did wrong? Was it because I associated with the wrong person? So when a person thinks about these things, one thing is that thinking about these things helps that person to find out where he went wrong. When you reflect on your failings, when you investigate, you can find out where you went wrong. That helps that person to, correct his mistakes. And at the same time, when you're thinking about these gains and losses, you realize that gains and losses are part of life. And it's not something that just happens to you, but also it's something that happens to everybody in life, right? That's one of the main benefits of thinking that, because the normal tendency of a person is that a person's mentality is just so limited to his own life. That's why, when a person loses something, it could be a relationship, loss of a relationship, or it could be loss of a lot of wealth. When that happens, a person quickly falls apart. He can't withstand it. He cannot face it. However, if a person thinks this, if a person thinks of his own achievements, if a person thinks of his own losses, as well as the achievements of others and the losses of others, he realizes that gains and losses, sampatti and vipatti, are part of life. Right? If you look back into the past year, if you think about, if you reflect on the people of Iran and Iraq, in this few days, people lost everything. Right? People lost their wealth, they lost their relations, they pretty much they lost their life, right? People lost everything. But at one point, they were living happily. They were living luxurious lives, right, with their family happily. So that was a point. That those were times of gain, and then within a few days, they faced times of loss. So when a person thinks like this, then he also realizes that if losses and gains such as that happens to others, then it can happen to me as well, right? You're not exempt from that. Now we're here we are living happily. We don't have any problem. We are not in face of a war. But who knows, in a few days we might be, right? So if you think about this, so when you're thinking these points, which is thinking of your own gains and achievements, as well as of others, and thinking of your own failings and losses as well as others, then what you're really thinking is you're thinking reality. You're not living in a dream bubble. You're living in reality, you're facing reality, and you're thinking reality. When you're thinking reality, then you're able to face reality when it hits you without letting your mind fall apart. So, one of the main things that people don't do is this: they're living in a dream world, they're living, they're not thinking reality, they're living in a virtual world. And when reality hits them, they cannot bear it. They cannot face it. They cannot withstand it. Therefore, some people go insane. Some people's just life, their entire life falls apart. You can't withstand it. Like, for example, if your mother or your father or your husband or your wife or your children, when they get sick, when they are when they are hit with a serious illness, like for some people, their entire life falls apart and their entire focus is that person. They can't think anything beyond that. However, if a person, and so he's so stressed out, he's so concerned, his entire life revolves around that incident. However, so that is a loss in life, right? If someone you love is sick, if he's facing a serious illness, that's a loss in life. It's a vipatti, a tragic time in your life. However, if you're someone who thinks this in advance, so before it happens, you think, what is that? From time to time, when you see others facing such incidents, you think, this is a vipatti that has happened to another person, a loss or a tragic moment that has happened to another person. And at the same time, when you think and investigate, you realize that can happen to me too. Right? So when you think like that, when that reality hits you, you're able to withstand and face it much better. Because you realize, you understand that these things has to be faced by everybody in this world. Because when losses comes in our way, sometimes we think, oh, this only happens to me. I'm the one who's so sad, I'm so sorrowful. And we think we are so limited to, you know, that uh, that bubble that we are living in. But we don't realize that this thing has happened many times before, now, and will happen in the future to others as well. So when you think like that, it makes your mind much stronger. That's one point. Okay. So that's why this is a beautiful exposition of Dhamma. So when Venerable Uttara was teaching this to the bhikkhus there, something very amazing happened, and that was, on that occasion, the great King Vessavana, he is the ruler of the northern side. Okay, so great King Vessavana, he was traveling from north to south on some business, and he heard, the Deva Vessavana heard the Venerable Uttara teaching this exposition of Dhamma to the bhikkhus. And what he did is he quickly, just as a strong man might extend his drawn in arm or draw in his extended arm, that is, the time it takes for you to extend one's arms or extend one's arm or draw back one's arm in a very short time. What Deva Vesavana did is he disappeared from Mount Sakeya, where he heard the Dhamma exposition, and he appeared in the Tavatin's heaven. Do you understand? So now imagine this. Venerable Uttara is teaching the Dhamma to the bhikkhus, and at that very moment, a Deva happened to go above them. And the Deva heard this because the Devas have divine ears, they can hear. Even though they are going from far away, they can hear because Devas are so interested in the Dhamma that when they hear Dhamma exposition, sometimes they stop. When they, although they're traveling on some business, they stop and they listen, it's said in the Dhamma. They listen to the Dhamma. So that's why when you are saying, when you are talking the Dhamma, when you are discussing the Dhamma, we think it's just the human beings who are listening. But really, there might be Devas, there might be non-human beings who are listening to it. And they rejoice in it. They are so happy to hear the Dhamma. So God Vesavana heard the Dhamma, and when the moment he heard the Dhamma, he stopped where he was going, and what he did is he disappeared from where he was, and he reappeared in the Tavatin's heaven, the god of the world of the god Sakka. And he told God Sakka, the rulers of Devas in the Tavatin's heaven, what he heard. That is, while I was going, I heard Venerable Uttara saying this Dhamma point, this Dhamma exposition to the bhikkhus, which is from time to time, a bhikkhu should review his own failings as well as of others. And from time to time, a bhikkhu should review one's own achievements as well as of others. And the moment God Sakka heard this, God Sakka also disappeared from the Tavatin's heaven, and he reappeared in Mahisavattu, where Venerable Uttara was teaching the Dhamma. Okay. And he paid God Sakka, he paid homage to Venerable Uttara, and standing on one side, he asked, Venerable Sir, is it true that you taught this exposition of Dhamma to the bhikkhus? Okay. And at that time, Venerable Uttara says, yes, ruler of Devas, I taught this Dhamma to the bhikkhus. And so God Sakka asked, but Bhante, was this your own discernment, or was it the word of the Blessed One, the Arahant, the perfectly enlightened one? So God Sakka is asking now, God Sakka is asking, is what you taught, is it your teaching, or is it the teaching of the Buddha? So at that time, Venerable Uttara says a beautiful simile. He says, ruler of the Devas, God Sakka, I will give you a simile. Okay. Some intelligent people understand the meaning of what's being said by similes. So Venerable Uttara says, okay, suppose there's a huge pile of grain in a certain village. Okay, so in a certain village, there's a huge pile of grain, and many people go there and take grain from there. They fill their buckets, they fill their bags, they fill their sacks from the grains there, and then they go to different places. So if someone were to come and ask from the crowd who has come to take grain from that heap of grain, where did you get the grain? What should they say? So God Sakka replies, Bhante, those people should say, we got grain from that great heap of grain there in that village. So Venerable Uttara says, so too, ruler of Devas, whatever is well spoken is all the words of the Blessed One, the Arahant, the perfectly enlightened one. I myself and others derive our good words from him. Right? So he's saying, just as if there's a huge heap of grain, different people go and take the amount of grain that they need from that great heap of grain. In that same way, all good words are said by the Supreme Buddha, and what we do and what others do is, learn from the Supreme Buddha and take the Dhamma from the Supreme Buddha's teaching. So when this was said, God Saka was very happy, and he said, it's astounding, it's amazing, Bhante, how well you stated this. He was very happy about the way, because Venerable Uttara, he could have said, this is my understanding, right? He could have said, because these days that's what many people do. They learn the Dhamma and they think they realized it, that it's their understanding, and they teach it to others as if it's their understanding, as if it's their realization. So Venerable Uttara could have done that too, but he didn't. Why? Because he had much respect and honor towards the Buddha, the Dhamma, and the Sangha. So therefore, he said, no, this is not my understanding, but rather it's the words of the Supreme Buddha. So when he said that, God Saka was so happy. Okay. And at that moment, God Saka also, God Saka told Venerable Uttara this. Okay. He says, Venerable Sir, Venerable Uttara, on one occasion, Bhante Uttara, the Blessed One was living in Rajagaha, in the Gijjakuta mountain. Not long after Devadatta had left. So now God Sakka is recollecting a time where he heard this exposition of Dhamma directly from the Supreme Buddha. Okay, so it was a time not long after Devadatta had left. Devadatta had left, meaning, as you know, Devadatta was the Supreme Buddha's cousin. So after he became ordained, he was very jealous of the Supreme Buddha, and he wanted to become the Buddha himself. So in many instances, he tried to kill the Buddha, but of course, it's not something a person can do. If you remember, on one instant, he rolled rocks at the Supreme Buddha to kill him, and he sent a drunken elephant, Nalagiri, to kill the Supreme Buddha. So and he sent many shooters to kill the Supreme Buddha, because he was so greedy that he wanted to become the Buddha and get all the gain and honor a Buddha would gain. And therefore, he tried to destroy the Supreme Buddha at many times. And when he couldn't do that, what he did is he broke the Sangha. He broke the unity of the Sangha, and he got some monks to incline towards his own view, and he took that group of Sangha and he left the Buddha's dispensation to live on his own. That's called Sangha Beda. So God Sakka, he knows all of these things. So he says this was taught by the Buddha not long after that incident. There, the Blessed One addressed the bhikkhus, and with reference to Devadatta, the Supreme Buddha said, "Bhikkhus, it's good for a bhikkhu from time to time review his own feelings." So at that moment was when the Supreme Buddha taught this Dhamma exposition to the bhikkhus. So now God Sakka is recollecting the direct words of the Supreme Buddha. So he's saying, on that occasion, the Supreme Buddha said, "Bhikkhus, it's good for a bhikkhu from time to time to review his own feelings. It is good from time to time to review one's own feelings as well as feelings of others. It's good for a bhikkhu from time to time to review his own achievements. And it's good for a bhikkhu from time to time to review the achievements or gains of others." And the Supreme Buddha had taught bhikkhus, because Devadatta was overcome and obsessed by 8 bad conditions. Devadatta was bound for hell, was bound for plane of misery, and he will remain there for an eon, unredeemable. Okay, so after the Supreme Buddha said that, the Supreme Buddha continued to teach. And the Supreme Buddha taught Devadatta is bound for the plane of misery. That means Devadatta is to be reborn in the hell world because he was overcome and obsessed by 8 bad conditions. Okay. And the Supreme Buddha teaches what these 8 conditions are. The Supreme Buddha teaches because he was overcome and obsessed by gain, Devadatta is bound for the plane of misery, bound for hell, and he will remain there for an eon, unredeemable. Unredeemable meaning you cannot change it. Once you die here, you will be reborn in the hell world without any other existence in between. Okay. What is the reason? Because he was overcome and obsessed by gain. Okay, Devadatta was so focused on gaining Buddha, on gaining the position of the Buddha, and he was overcome by it. Meaning, his mind was overcome by gain. Okay, and wanting that is what controlled his mind, and that is why he did so many things to kill the Buddha, and that is trying to kill a Buddha is one of the 5 heinous crimes. So killing a Buddha, you cannot kill a Buddha, but even if you shake the blood of a Buddha, that is a heinous crime. And if we do a heinous crime, just remember the teachers, without a doubt, in your next life, you're going to be reborn in the hell world, and you will be reborn in hell for an eon without being able to return back to any other world. And Devadatta is bound for the plane of misery, bound for hell, because he was obsessed and overcome by loss. Okay, so these 8 conditions is something that you should definitely remember. Okay, becoming overcome and obsessed by loss. That means when a person faces loss, then that person's mind becomes overcome and overwhelmed by their loss. You know, that's the second one. And then Devadatta is bound for the plane of misery because he is overcome and obsessed by fame. Okay, that desire to be very famous among others. He wanted to be the Buddha because then he can be very famous. People will everybody will know him. He really wanted that fame in his mind, and he was overcome and obsessed by it. That's the third one. And the fourth one is he was obsessed and overcome by disrepute. Disrepute meaning loss of fame. Okay. And the fifth one he was obsessed and overcome by honor. That is, people respecting him and giving him things and honoring him. He was so obsessed by honor. He was so attached, and that's the only thing he wanted. And also he was obsessed and he was overcome by lack of honor. Okay. So that means, I will explain it later after I say the 8 conditions. And the 7th is he was obsessed and overcome by evil desires. Okay. And the 8th is he was obsessed and overcome by bad friendship. Devadatta is bound for the plane of misery, bound for hell, and he will remain there for an eon because he was overcome by these 8 conditions. Okay, so what are these 8 conditions? The first one is gain. The second one is loss. The third one is fame. The fourth one is disrepute. The fifth one is honor. The sixth one is lack of honor. The seventh is evil desires. And the eighth is bad friendship. Okay. And as remember the teachers, it is good for a bhikkhu to overcome gain whenever it arises. Okay, so now first let's discuss what it means to become overcome and obsessed by gain. Okay, now if a person, now Devadatta was so desirous towards gain. That means he always wants things for himself. He wanted the Buddhahood for himself, and he would do anything for those gains. And at the same time, he was overcome and obsessed by loss. That means if he faced a loss, then his mind would be overcome by that. Now, in your everyday life, it's like this. Now, suppose someone gets a lot of money all of a sudden. That's a gain for that person, right? So when a person gets a lot of money all of a sudden, if that person is overcome and obsessed by that gain, then I'm sure you have experienced this in your everyday life, that some people all of a sudden when they get a lot of money, they completely change. They boast about themselves, their entire world revolves around the money, and they talk so highly about themselves. They are so overcome by that gain. They are obsessed by that gain. That is not a good thing. Why? Because if a person is overcome and obsessed by gain, so now you can relate this to your everyday life, the incidents of gains in everyday lives. Okay. So when that happens, what happens is, suppose you lose it after. Now remember, previously we talked about from time to time, a person gets achievements and gain, a person has to face losses. That is the reality of life. So when a person is so overcome by gain, so his entire mind is revolving around that, he's obsessed by that. And then suppose he loses it, what happens? His mind just completely falls apart. He can't face that reality. He's just complete, he goes insane. His entire life is just, falling apart. He can't face it. And so he gives in to that loss. He's crying, he's in the sorrow, and then they go into depression, right? So he cannot live a balanced life, and that's one thing that happens. Okay. And then when if a person is overcome and obsessed by fame, he always want to be famous around others. He always want lots of people to be around him. Okay. And so when he gets that, he becomes overcome. Right? There are people like that. There are people who are very poor, and all of a sudden, you are recognized for your um, intelligence or your skills, and then you all of a sudden you're so famous all around. And when that happens, what happens is they think so highly of themselves, and they are overcome by that fame. They can't take it neutrally. I've heard of a certain incident where I think it's happened in India. In India, that person was a very poor person, just on the streets, I think, playing an instrument or something, and then somebody recognized him for his skills, or for her skills, and all of a sudden, she was so popular on social media, and all of a sudden people um, started to talk about it, and then she became so overcome and so obsessed over her fame, and became instead of becoming humble, she became so egoistic, and other people uh, detested her after that because she was so egoistic. That is called becoming overcome by fame. So your mind completely changes if you're someone who becomes obsessed and overcome by fame. And at the same time, when you face it disrepute, that means, the opposite of being famous. That means, people are accusing you of things, you're blamed for things. So when such things happen, you can face it. And you become overcome by the disrepute, and you're in depression, you're so sorrowful, you can't live a balanced life. You're overcome by that disrepute. And the same with honor and lack of honor. Those people who, when they are honored and when they're respected, where if you're obsessed and overcome by that honor, then what happens is the moment you lose that honor, you can't face it. You can't bear with it. Why? Because you let that honor overcome you, and you let your mind become obsessed by that honor. That means you were so attached to it, you were so you desire it so much. And so when you lose it, you can't bear it. Okay? So Devadatta was like this. Okay, and so remember the teachers. The seventh is evil desires. If a person lets his mind become overcome by evil desire means, I will give you an example. Now, for example, a person always wants to be um, the center of attention. That is the evil desire. That is a very immature. It's not something a mature person would think. It's a very immature. It's a very low quality thought. Always want to be the center of attention. And so if a person has such thoughts, or a person has the evil desire to always uh, has the evil desire to um, um, for example, get the highest position in the company, although he does not have the right qualifications in his mind, he really wishes, he wants to be the top in the company, but he doesn't have the qualification, he doesn't have any background for it, but in his mind he so desires it. That's an evil desire. That's a very immature thing to think. So just remember the teachers, if a person becomes obsessed by such evil desires, okay, then that 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 can cause a problem within. And at the same time, if a person lets bad friendships, papa mitas, if your mind is overcome, if your mind is obsessed by bad friendship, if you can't control it, if you can't control bad friendships in the right way, then you can get in deep trouble. Okay, what that means is, now for example, when you're living in your everyday life, there are good people that you have to associate with, and there are bad people, right? So sometimes we can't control. Sometimes we have to. For example, in your job, there are certain people that you have to talk with. There are certain people that you have to interact with. But they may be evil. They're not noble friends. They are not good friends, or good people rather. But you should not let them control you. You should not let that association control you. You should be able to in control of yourself without letting that association affect your mind. Because sometimes when people associate with bad people, they turn to be like them. What does that mean? That means you have become overcome by that bad friendship. So then you end up in big trouble, deep trouble. The Supreme teaches, and then there are some people, the Supreme teaches in terms of association, there are certain people that you should associate with, and there are certain people that you should not associate with, and there are certain people you should keep at a very distant length. Okay, The Survey teaches if a person is virtuous, if a person is mindful, if a person has good qualities in life, equal to you or better than you, you should associate with such people. But if a person has lower qualities than you should not associate with such people. And then the Survey teaches if there are certain people, they're very aggressive. They quickly get angry. The Survey teaches such people you should not associate with, but you should just talk with them. Don't get them to be your enemies, but talk with them, keep them at a distance, but don't associate with them. Why? Because if you stop talking to that person, or if you stop um, interacting with that person, that person might get aggressive and hurt you and harm you. So you have to know that. And so knowing that, you have to, keep your distance but talk and just keep the distance and be mindful. So there are certain ways to interact with different people. So you have to be very mindful and know. When you know and you're mindful, then you are able to not let those associations overcome you, but rather you're in control. Okay, but if you let those bad friendships uh, overcome you, then you get in big trouble. Okay, so the Supreme Buddha teaches. Furthermore, God Saka. So now who's saying this? God Saka is saying this. God Saka says, furthermore, the Supreme Buddha teaches like this. It is good for a bhikkhu to overcome gain whenever it arises. So when a gain arises, the Supreme Buddha teaches you should not let that gain overcome you, but rather you should overcome that gain. Meaning you should not let that gain make you obsessed. Okay, understand? So now if you think that Dhamma exposition that you thought previously, which is from time to time, you always think about your own achievements as well as the achievements of others. From time to time, you think of your own failings and the failings of others. If you think that, then you can easily practice this, and that is when you get a gain, you can not let your mind become overcome by that gain. How? Because gain is impermanent. It's not going to be there forever. So you think of that impermanence, and you can quickly think of that impermanence if you think that previous Dhamma exposition. From time to time, if you always think the achievements and the failings. So then your mind does not become overcome by gain. And the same thing with losses. When you're faced with a loss, you don't let that loss overcome your mind. You're in control of your mind. Even losses are impermanent. After some time, you will be able to regain your wealth, or make adjustment for your loss and continue your life. So you don't let that loss overcome your mind. And then you don't let fame overcome you, and you don't let disrepute overcome you. Okay, so now, for example, for you to understand what it means for fame or praise to overcome you, now suppose someone comes and tells you, "Oh, you're so beautiful." So what is that? It's a praise, right? And so when someone comes and tells you like that, if you quickly become so happy, what does that mean? That means you have let that praise overcome your mind. Understand? Suppose you just sang a song and someone came and told you, "Oh, you have the sweetest voice in the world." And when you hear it, you just feel so extremely happy. What does that mean? You let that praise overcome your mind. So you have become obsessed, and then you continue to think about that. That is called becoming overcome by praise. Okay. So if you become overcome by praise, the next moment if someone comes and say, oh, you're so ugly, or you look so you're not pretty at all, then all of a sudden, how do you feel? You quickly get upset. You quickly get sad, right? However, if you think, okay, all of these things are impermanent, they're changing. That's the meaning of that is the meaning of thinking from time to time, thinking of losses and gains. Everything is changing all the time. Everything is impermanent. You think like that when someone comes and tells you, "Oh, you're so beautiful," then you know that beauty, it's something that you have. You don't have to be. Um, it's not some. It's not something. It's something that you have, so you don't have to be, overly happy about it. And you know that this beauty is going to fade away one day. It's not going to be there forever. Once you grow old, and when you're growing old, when you're aging, this beauty is going to fade away one day. You know the reality, so you're always thinking reality. Okay, so the Supreme teaches it's good for a bhikkhu to overcome these gains, fame, disrepute, honor, lack of honor, evil desires, and bad friendships. And the Supreme teaches, and for what reason should a bhikkhu overcome gain whenever it arises? For what reason should he overcome loss whenever he arises? So what the Supreme is asking, why should you be able to overcome gain? Why should you be able to not gain, overcome your mind, not gain, make you obsessed? Why should you not let fame make you obsessed? Why should you not let disrepute, honor, lack of honor, evil friends, evil desires, not overcome you? And the Supreme Buddha teaches the reason is if a person let those overcome his mind, then that gives rise to defilements, that gives rise to taints. But if a person does not let those 8 conditions overcome his mind, then his mind does not give rise to those defilements. I will explain what this means. Okay. Now suppose you're so focused on gaining something. Okay, now let's, for example, say it's a job. Okay, so in your workplace, you're so keen on getting a promotion. You're so obsessed by that gain. You really want it. Okay, you really want it. Now you're so trying so hard to gain it. Okay, now what does that mean? Your mind is now obsessed by a gain. Now you have not gotten it yet, but you're still trying so hard to gain it. You're obsessed in getting that gain. Okay, and then what happens is somebody else gets the promotion. Now what happens? If your mind was obsessed by that gain, then the moment somebody else gets it, it gives rise to evil thoughts. You become jealous, you get angry, correct? And those evil thoughts, those evil, unwholesome defilements makes you end up doing so many wrong things. Understand? So becoming overcome by these 8 conditions makes your mind give rise to more defilements. That is the danger. Okay, if you're someone who's so keen on being praised, wherever you go, you always want other people to praise you. Your mind is obsessed by praise. Then you go into, say, you go into a party. You're so you're dressed well, and you think, oh no, today everybody is going to praise me because everybody is going to say I'm so beautiful. Now, thinking this, hoping this, wishing this, you go into the party and nobody even looks at you, but rather they are praising another person. Oh, you look so beautiful. And when you hear it, what happens? You feel jealous. You get angry. You can't even enjoy the party anymore. Do you see why did that happen? Because you wanted to be famous. Your mind was obsessed by fame. Your mind was overcome by fame. You let your mind become overcome by fame. Therefore, when you didn't get it, you give rise to evil thoughts. Right? And the same with honor and lack of honor. Okay? And then you let your mind become overcome by evil desires. Okay, for example, you always want to be the first. Okay, you go somewhere and you think, oh, they will treat me first. They will give me first. You always want to be the first in everywhere. And then you go, and so that is the evil desire that you have. And then you go and nobody's giving you priority. Others are given priority. So what happens is you get angry. Why aren't they looking into me? Why aren't they giving me priority? And in your mind, a bunch of wrong defilements or unwholesome defilements are arising and growing in your mind. So that entire hour you're there, you're angry, you're jealous, you're upset. Do you understand? So what the Supreme Buddha is teaching here is if a person let his mind become overcome by these things, these 8 conditions, gain, lack of gain, fame, lack of fame, disrepute, honor, lack of honor, evil desires, and bad friendships. If you let bad friendships overcome you, if you can't control it, if you can't manage it, then that gives rise to evil thoughts, that gives rise to evil actions, and you get in deep trouble. And the danger of these unwholesome defilements arising in your mind is it can lead you to a rebirth in the plane of misery. That's the reason that Devadatta was bound to, that's why the Supreme Buddha said, Devadatta is bound to being reborn in the plane of misery in the hell world. Why? Because he was overcome by these 8 conditions, and with these 8 conditions, jealousy grew in him, evil desires, evil thoughts grew in him, and those thoughts made him do wrong actions, made him say wrong things, made him do wrong things, made him think wrong things, and therefore that dragged him back to the fourfold hell. Understand? So these 8 conditions, you have to be very mindful not to let these 8 conditions overcome you, because in your everyday life, most people let these 8 conditions overcome their mind. If they don't gain something, they get very upset, and their mind is just sorrowful, sad, and then when somebody else gains it, they're jealous, they get angry, they can't bear it. So your mind is always filled with impure thoughts. However, if a person does not let these 8 conditions overcome his mind, he can live so happily. He knows that everything is gain is impermanent. He knows loss is impermanent. He knows that fame is impermanent. Family is not always going to be with us. Okay, time to time that's going to change. Friends are always not going to be with us. From time to time it's going to change. So when he loses it and when he gains it, he does not let more defilements arise into his mind. He does not let evil defilements arise in his mind. He's happy and his mind is pure. Okay. So this is a very important Dhamma exposition. If a person practices this, then it helps that person to keep his mind pure. That is the most important thing. A pure mind is definitely needed in order to even be reborn in a good world in your next life. Okay, so if you practice purifying your mind like this, then that will lead you and make you quickly develop your Dhamma path. That's why I mentioned even in the beginning. Okay. So so in this way, now who's saying this? God Sakka is saying this to Venerable Uttara. Okay, because Venerable Uttara, he only taught the bhikkhus that first part. Now see this, so see the benefit of associating with devas, right? So this God Deva, he heard the direct teaching of the Buddha from the Buddha himself, and he remembered it, right? So Venerable Uttara only taught the first part that the Supreme Buddha taught in this Dhamma exposition. And that first part is, from time to time, bhikkhu should think of his own achievements as well as others, as well as of others. And from time to time, a bhikkhu should think of his own losses as well as the losses of others. So he only said the first part, right? So God Sakka, he recited the entire teaching of the Supreme Buddha in this way. And afterwards, he says a beautiful thing to Venerable Uttara. God Sakka says, Bante Uttara, this exposition of the Dhamma, this exposition of Dhamma is not being practiced by the four human assemblies, which are bhikkhus, bhikkhunis, male lay followers, and female lay followers. So he's saying, Venerable Sir, this Dhamma exposition is not something that's being practiced these days. Now, by this time, this is towards the end of the Supreme Buddha's life. Okay, after the Sangha Veda, by this time the Supreme Buddha is in his last days. So by that time, even the Supreme Buddha's dispensation was, deteriorating little by little. During the first period of the Supreme Buddha's dispensation, people quickly purified their mind and they quickly became arhats. But even while the Supreme Buddha was alive, the dispensation people's Dhamma practice were deteriorating little by little. Okay, so God Saka saw that many people are overcome by these 8 conditions: bhikkhus, bhikkhunis, lay followers, and female lay followers. And so he says, Bante, learn this exposition of Dhamma, master this exposition of Dhamma, and retain this exposition of Dhamma, and retain this exposition of Dhamma, because this exposition of Dhamma is beneficial. It pertains to the fundamentals of the spiritual life. So God Sakka in the end, he told Venerable Uttara, this Dhamma exposition is so important, is so fundamental to the spiritual life, but this is not something that's being practiced by bhikkhus, bhikkhunis, and lay followers and female followers. And therefore, you should practice this, teach this, and try to spread this among others so that they will also practice this. Okay, so that is how so the God realizes how important this is, because gods can see people's minds. Gods have the ability to see our mind. If we let defilements overcome our mind, they can see. If we keep our minds pure, they can see that too. So if our mind is pure only, gods connect with us. If our minds are pure only, gods help us. If we let these corrupted defilements overcome our mind, even gods look away. Okay? So that is the end of the sutta. So if a person can practice this beautiful Dhamma exposition into his life, he can really speedily develop his Dhamma path, because this beautiful Dhamma exposition really helps a person to keep his mind pure. So may this beautiful Dhamma exposition help all of us to purify our minds and stop our minds from giving rise to unwholesome thoughts, defilements, and may this Dhamma exposition help all of us to realize the Four Noble Truths, purify our minds completely, and find real happiness, reach Nibbana in this Gauta Buddha's dispensation. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu.